Good evening, everyone. I, Ashna Siddiqui, on behalf of Birla School of Law, welcome all of you to our webinar, Beyond Bias, Empowering Women for Sustainable Growth. We have the pleasure of having distinguished panelists for our webinar today. We have Ms. Namrata Jain, who pursued engineering and has cleared civil services examination in 2017 as well as in 2018, and is currently serving as an assistant collector, Baloda Bazar, Chhattisgarh. Next, we have Ms. Purnima Pandyan. She has done engineering and has cleared the Forest Service examination in 2014 and is currently serving as DFO Bhadrak, Odisha. Then we have Ms. Neha Mukherjee, a law graduate who has worked as a project coordinator for the Rape Crisis Cell in New Delhi and has been working at the forefront of Right to Abortion campaign in India. She works with Human Rights Law Network, New Delhi. We also have our Dean of Birla School of Law, Dr. L.K. Dev, with us today, along with my colleagues, Ms. Palak Java, Ms. Ishani Acharya, and Mr. Punya Shlok. Dear participants, before we begin the webinar, please note that we'll take your questions at the end of the webinar. Now, as we proceed towards beginning our webinar, we need to understand there are two key terms that we need to underline, highlight, and that will have the focus in our webinar throughout. One being women being empowered, that is women empowerment, and the second one, that's sustainable growth. Almost all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals 2030 demands an inclusive society, which will only be happening if we have women being given equal and fair representation everywhere in society. As we begin with the first question, my first question is to you, Ms. Namrata. We've progressed as a society and we've seen women, coming forward and trying to make their own way and have started working in so many various professions, which they were not if we see some decades ago. So what do you think about women in the leadership position? And having said that, we still see that women are not really everywhere at the topmost position. Why do you think it's happening? We have not yet had our first female Chief Justice of India. We have not seen a Secretary General at the United Nations. So why do you think that it's important to have women in decision-making process? And how do you think that women should be, given more and more chances in leadership positions?
Hello everyone. This question always comes in my mind also. Prior to this, I was in Indian Police Service, I was doing my training in National Police Academy. And I always thought that, when initial inhibitions were there, when I was allotted in Police Service. But then when I question myself that when I think that why only guys can serve as a better police officers, why not girls? My mind said it's always there in mind. It's not there. When I was training, we used to be in a similar position with the guys and we used to compete accordingly. We used to do everything. So somewhere I think there is a societal bias also, and to some extent it's just there in our mind. We've been processed like that right from our beginning. Girls are given a toy and guys are given a robot or something to play. So I think it's starting from the nourishment. It's starting from there and then it goes on. The other thing I feel is that there are both the aspects to this, the social aspect which I am saying, as well as the economic aspect also. There are many private organizations in which we see that the women are recruited. There are various women when the entry level post, there are various women and they get equal representation. But when it comes to top level CEOs or managers, the ratio is very poor. So what I think is there's a glass ceiling still persistent, and beyond that the women are not able to progress to. So yes, I think that's another thing. So it's basically both the things. The gender pay gap is also there, as well as the opportunity gap is also there. The other point which I feel is we don't have women mentors. When we'll have women mentors to guide us, to support us in the system, other women may feel that yes, it is possible. And hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello.
Please go. Yes, we can hear you.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Namrata, please speak. I think there was some connection issue with Namrata. So we'll proceed with our next question, and she can join again and continue with her answer. So my next question is to you, Ms. Purnima, and since you are a forest officer, so I would like to focus more about an issue that's been there for long, but we've not really been doing anything about it. So that's climate change. So what do you think? How does a woman actually play a role in achieving environmental sustainability? Because we know that it's such an important issue. Everybody has been going on and talking about it. So what does the role of a woman in achieving environmental sustainability is, basically? How does a woman play a role in it?
Yes, thank you, Ashna. So let me start with the definition of sustainable development first. So everyone knows the present generation also needs resources, the future generation also needs resources. So balancing the needs of the coming generations, that is more important than sustainable development. So mostly people think that sustainable development is related to environment. There are three facets of sustainable development. One is environmental angle, another is economic, and another is social angle. So let us start with the environmental angle first, how women can contribute in sustainable development relating to environment. Let us take the example of clean energy first. So the clean energy starts at home. People use fuel wood collected from the forest, especially the tribal women. They collect fuel wood from the forest for energy at home. So how do we bring clean energy in the first place? We can do that only with respect to women. We need awareness programs. And when I was an DFO, when I was as DFO Koraput, we conducted this clean energy campaign. We distributed LPG under Ujjwala scheme to major tribal households. So only when women are playing a major role in energy, so without women, how would we able to bring about a change in clean energy? And second thing is related to agriculture. Everybody is saying that we need sustainable agriculture in the coming future, otherwise the land resources would go waste. We would not be having effective utilization of the land resources. So now 84 percentage of the rural women, they are playing a major role in agriculture, and 47 percentage are working as laborers, and 33 percentage are the owners, cultivators. Now if we are conducting an program on creating awareness regarding organic farming, effective utilization of land resources, and so on and so on, what is the percentage of the women in such training and capacity building measures? I think it is very, very less. So unless and until we include women in each and every aspect of the awareness programs and the capacity building programs, we would not be able to bring about sustainable agriculture. And consider for major example, the role that the plastic waste play. So why do we use plastics? Mainly for household purposes. So if we are able to create awareness among women, especially the ill effects of the plastic and the harm that it creates to the environment, I think we would be able to reduce its effect on the environment very well. So everything starts from the household. We have to take steps at the individual level and then move on to the community level. I think at the individual level, women are the major caretakers of the households. So we need to include women, otherwise the sustainable development anything related to sustainable development and a climate change would be futile if we don't include women. And second thing is social aspect and economic aspect. We are talking about fulfilling the needs of present generation. So who is the present generation? Does it include only men? No, it includes women also. So economically, if you see, women are more poorer than men. The income of women is less, the property that the women holds is less. So unless and until we meet the needs of the current generation women, how will we be able to provide fulfill the needs of the future generation? And second thing is, we take hunger, starting from the household level to the community level. The percentage of the women who are lesser in hunger index is more than compared to the men. So unless and until we include women in creating sustainable development, it is not possible for us to go forward with the major goals.
Thank you. Indeed, it is important and pertinent to include women so that we go ahead and we proceed with the Sustainable Development Goals. My next question is to you, Ms. Neha. And we have seen that women have fought a long battle to have right over their bodies, and it's still continuing. We still see that women have not been really able to, make decisions about their own bodies. Since you have worked on health rights and reproductive rights specifically of women, so I would want to ask you a question. Could you please elaborate that why do we need effective reproductive rights, and how having the control of a body, of your own body, helps us to empower a woman? What decisions does a woman take, and how does it play a role in making that woman empowered in the society?
Thank you, Ashna. Thank you for the question. I think I will start with what Poonam and Namrata had said earlier, because there is always a connection. Poonam is working, Namrata is working, and I think the kind of issues that we face as women in any sphere, I think in urban cities or as well as in rural cities, are very similar in nature. Because I remember when Namrata mentioned that, there, I think Purnima also mentioned that there is pay disparity. The amount of access to, I think, information is very limited. And I think when we talk about reproductive health also, what we really understand is that there are laws in place. Of course, there are laws in place and there are schemes in place which say that, which they have been created to protect women, and they have been created to safeguard women or provide them access to services. But the problem really is, how are these norms created? How are these being implemented? And are they actually reaching women who are supposed to be at the receiving end, who are supposed to benefit from these? Are they created to benefit them? Because when you look at the schemes, or you look at as an example would be the Right to Abortion Act, because I've also worked largely on abortion. If you really look at the law, you will realize that it is a very provider-centric law, and that is I think one of the main issues that we face when it comes to a lot of these laws and schemes that we have in place, which say that they are created to provide women the kind of services, the kind of rights that they require to be able to access everything and to be able to live and their life at the same standard as everybody else. Now, just like Purnima said, I remember being in Jharkhand and meeting tribal women who are farmers. They are in the field every day with their children, and one of the major problems that they faced was every time they had their periods, they would have to walk 3 kilometers to the nearest pond to wash their clothes, because they did not have access to sanitary napkins, something as basic as sanitary napkin. The closest CHC or the closest PHC did not have sanitary napkins. They did not have information. The people working did not have information on contraceptive. So I think when we talk about women, and when we talk about women having access to services, women having access to reproductive health, I think it all boils down to how women are seen in a society or in a given setting, in a social setting. Because the entire situation, I think Purnima and Namrata might actually agree that a lot of it actually boils down to how we as individuals or as human beings are seen in a social strata. What is the role that is attributed to us? How those roles, those societal norms then impact those roles, and how that eventually impact the policy that is created to protect us or to give us the rights that we require. Now, for example, the MTP Act, you will see that a lot of people believe that the act is actually liberal, in the sense that it provides women access to termination of pregnancy until 20 weeks under certain circumstances. But the thing is that if you look at the language of the law, or if you look at the history, of the act, you will realize that it was not created for women in the first place. It was created to safeguard the providers because there is criminal provision in the IPC which says that in cases which basically makes doctors and service providers criminally liable. So the focus has not been women. And if you look at the other laws, I think if you look at the other so-called women-centric laws, I think some of the major flaws at the policy level is that all of these law at some level, I think, or even the implementation of these, I think at some level affected by the gender stereotypes that there are. These are very, very basic gender stereotypes. Sometimes in a society, we do not realize how these gender stereotypes play. For example, women in a given setting or in a society, be it India or even in the Western culture, I think it's not very different anywhere. Women in general are seen as people who need to be protected, who require protection, who are not seen as able decision makers, who are not seen as reasonable decision makers, and hence the automatic, I think, assumption is that because women cannot make their own decisions, they're not reasonable enough to decide what is best for them, and therefore require protection, much more state protection. Therefore, let's not provide them information that will allow them to make an informed decision. Let's curb their right. So there are two ways of going about it, right? Either you provide women the information that they require to make an informed decision, like having a child or not wanting to have a child, to be pregnant or not to be pregnant, to use contraception, what sort of contraception to use, right? And because this information, because it is easier to curb their right than to provide, I think, that the information and the service, because by providing that sort of information, you're actually giving women the autonomy to make decisions that will then impact their life and their right, I think, and their access to enjoy and live their life professionally, their personal lives to the fullest. I think because then you're opening doors for women. Very often you will realize that the laws actually, the policies actually cut down on our rights more than giving us access to the rights. And I think that is how it impacts right to, I think, women's access to rights just generally in the, I think, in the personal strata as well as the professional strata to a very large extent.
That we need. We have policies and laws, but then they are pretty much colored and they're actually, not really working on for the women or for their benefit. Now we have Miss Namrata with us again. There was some technical glitch. Namrata, would you like to continue what you were speaking about women in leadership position and why do we need more and more women in leadership positions, please?
Yeah, so I was saying that women in leadership positions are actually needed because half of even there are reports which says that India, since a very big democracy, if women are also included in our workforce, our growth progress will be increased by 27%. So that being one of the reason, also for the empowerment of women themselves is also another reason. So I think still the bias attached that women are only particularly suited to particular jobs like nurses, so-called pink collar jobs. So we need to remove that bias from our mind as well as the societal bias must be removed. Hello.
Correct. Very well mentioned that we need to remove that certain professions are associated with only one particular gender. Now,
Yeah. And
going, yeah, please continue.
yeah, carry on.
So as we are all going through really difficult times because of this pandemic, it is pertinent to discuss issues how this particular pandemic is affecting the lives of women. And it will not be wrong if I say that women are the most affected section of the society because of this pandemic. So my next question is to you, Ms. Purnima. And we've seen women in urban areas lead a comparatively better life than what a woman in rural or a vulnerable area is actually living. I want to talk about specifically the women in forest areas and how has the pandemic affected their lives. So if you could elaborate a little about that.
Yes. So earlier I was posted in a tribal area, but now during the COVID pandemic, I am not posted there. So as far as the general knowledge of the things goes, I would say, especially you see the COVID pandemic has affected mainly urban areas. The number of cases as well as the death rates, it is high only in urban areas and not near the forest areas. So as the statistics goes, the tribal people are less affected than the urban people when it comes to COVID-19. But in Odisha, the tribal women, they suffer from a disease called sickle cell anemia. So sickle cell anemia is everybody knows it is a condition where the type of the blood cells is different from the usual ones. It leads to clogging. So the report says that the COVID-19 symptoms would be extremely severe if it affects a person with the sickle cell anemia. As of now, hopefully it has not happened, but if the COVID-19 pandemic spreads to the forest areas, we need to have more caution, and we need to take more preventive measures so that the tribal women who are more prone to extreme symptoms of COVID-19 are protected. So this is the health angle. When it comes to the economic angle, in Odisha we have lot of non-timber forest produce, or we call it minor forest produce, such as kendu leaves, we call it tendu pata, and mahua, collection of mahua flowers, tamarind, and then karanja, pongamia pinnata seeds for oil and various other purposes. So especially during the month of March, April and May, the entire the tribal area people are involved in collection of such minor forest produce from the community forest land as well as the other forest land. And especially in KBK, Koraput, Bolangir and Kalahandi districts, the minor forest produce collected or either processed or without processing it is sent to other states. It is such a it is one of the major income for the tribal areas because of the COVID-19 and the restrictions on the movement interstate as well as intrastate. The economy of the tribal people have been impacted in a negative way. So even though the government has allowed a collection of MFP and its sale, because of the restrictions and the lockdown, it has impacted the tribal people negatively.
Correct. Very well mentioned that the tribal women are mostly affected economically because of this pandemic. My next question is to you, Ms. Sneha, and since we have been discussing and talking about women, we also need to focus on something that has been prevalent and is still prevalent in the society. That's the abuse that is done on women, the violence against women. So we have witnessed an increased rate of abuse and violence against women during this pandemic. So could you please highlight on that particular issue?
I think domestic abuse is something that is very common. What usually happens, it's not reported because of how much we have normalized. I think domestic abuse is one of the main problems with domestic abuse is also to what extent as a society and as families we normalize it. I mean, how many times have each of us heard that, somebody was abused in a domestic relationship, and it does not necessarily have to be a spousal relationship. It could be anything, like within a domestic setup. It could be anything. It could be living partners. It could be anything. How many times have we heard from our friends or from our neighbors or from just within people, from like people who are we interacting with every day, that they are facing domestic abuse, or they know of somebody who's been facing domestic abuse, but they don't want to do something about it because they think it's okay. And I think what pandemic has done is, because people have been confined to their houses and they have not been able to go out, I think the reporting has really gone high, because I think that the interaction and the level of violence I think within the houses have increased exponentially. I think personally, I believe a lot of it also has to do, again, like I think a big chunk of issues that we face as women is also because of how we are seen within our homes. We might be whoever, we might be the Prime Minister of India, but within the setup of homes or within the setup of our society, we would still be women. We would still be homemakers. And I think, like Namrata said, that there are roles, there are even professional roles that are attributed to women. They are roles that are domesticated in nature. They are roles that have a certain level of, I don't know, sometimes it is believed that women are more suited to do jobs which are domestic in nature, or which have a certain level of emotional quotient attached to it, which are not as technical in nature, and which is I think women have proved that it is not true. And but even then, I think within our homes, role of women have not changed, because no matter what you do in your life, you're still expected to go back home and cook for your family, and you cannot expect your male counterparts to do it. And I think the moment you are forced to spend more time within the bounds of your home, that responsibility, the imposition of that responsibility increases exponentially. And when I think that is one of the main problems why you see so many cases being uh, reported so often, because as individuals, we do not want, nobody wants, I think no human being wants to have to bear with that or wants to have to suffer through that. And because you do not have a way of, like, I think I'm glad that the reporting has increased, but I think as long as as long as we don't address the elephant in the room as to how we as individuals and we as women are seen within our homes, within our domestic setups, within our society, it is not going to change. And I think the lockdown, the pandemic has only brought it out front. It was always there, and I think it has just highlighted the issues that women face in their day-to-day lives.
That's very true. Domestic violence has always been there, just that the reports were not really coming. The, the real reports were not really visible. Now that the people were locked up in one particular, under one particular house, we've seen that there has been a rise in the cases. All right, we will be talking about the women migrant workers, because we've seen that the life of migrant workers have been really under a lot of stress. We have seen women carrying their children and trying to find out a place wherein they could settle or live for some time, provide basic shelter to their family, to their kids. So Namrata, my next question is to you, that how women, when I talk about women, migrant women workers, how their life has changed. What has been the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on their life specifically?
So one thing we'll have to accept that the impact on men and women will definitely be different. Not only because of the biology and physiology of the women, but also because of the social and economic role which we've allocated to the women. So this I'm personally seeing in my district, that the effect and the impact on women is very, very different. One thing is because of the informal kind of setup which we have created, and mostly the informal work which we have created in our society are catered by the women only. So they are highly vulnerable to such jobs. And now, since they are not able to move to their respective places because of the lockdown or because of whatever problems they have, so they are having high anxiety in them, and this has created panic among all of them. So I think basically they lack healthcare facility there. They have lack of movement from their places to other places, which is why, like Sneha was mentioning, that there's increase in the cases of domestic abuse, and the sexual harassment cases have been increasing like anything. So we have to understand the fact that women are mostly catering to the informal jobs when they are moving out, and they have no access to a so-called healthcare facility or any social protection in the informal work. So, and the other problem is they cannot return even to their homes because of variety of reasons. So they are suffering a lot. This also leads to the loss of livelihood of the women, and this in turn impacts to entire family of the women. Also, another point is which we are seeing the increase in cases of the sexual harassment and domestic abuse. So earlier, I think they had an option of moving out of their houses. Now, since they are locked in their houses, they are confined in a particular living condition. Plus, when we talk about quarantine centers, the institutional quarantine centers which we are managing there here also in our district. So because of the lack of space, the male and the female population there is put together in the houses. That is why also a lot of cases have been increased, call it verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual harassment. And in such cases, women are the victims here. It is a clear violation of human rights, I feel. So because of lack of freedom of movement also, as well as a lack of space also, and to some extent a poor policy making decisions also, the women are suffering. The other point I feel is the mental stress is also there, because a lot of anxiety and a panic, that initially the panic when they wanted to move from the place they are working to their respective home places was high, and when they were moving, I've myself seen that how in trains they were carrying their own children. I've seen pregnant women coming, so they have a different problems altogether. And when they are in QCs, also quarantine centers, I've seen that carrying small kids, and altogether there's a different issue. So I feel the impact is very different on women. Plus the stress level is also very high. So yeah, that's it from my side.
Right. We understand that the pandemic has actually, made women leave the house that they have actually when they were working, and they've lost the right to livelihood. My next question is to you, Ms. Neha. They say that women's right is equal to human's right, and then they had to really, focus and emphasize on the fact that women are humans in order to, have women come under human rights. So, what is your opinion on this? Why do we actually needed somebody to come and tell us in a conference in 1995 and declare this, that women's rights is equal to human's right? Why would we not really consider in this before?
I think that is because of how I think gender roles have changed. I think not just changed, how women have been seen in a domestic setup or in a social setup for time immemorial now. And the thing is that for the longest period, that gender role, I think women have stuck to the gender role. But the problem now, I think this is what I feel is that women have developed, their roles have changed exponentially, right? They're not confined to their homes. They're not just cooking meals for their families. They're not just taking care of their babies. They are not just taking care of their families. They have become independent. In they want to. I won't say they have become fully independent, but they aspire to become fully independent, financially independent, socially independent, right? And I think that transition which has happened also, I think, requires the recognition of certain rights that women require. And that is because by biologically we are different from men. And of course, that means that the requirements would be different. And there are certain things that need to be addressed. There are certain rights that women have that needs to be, I think, recognized, identified more than anything else, so that women can have access to those rights. For example, maternity benefits, right? So now, over the years, now Western countries and even I think a lot of MNCs are coming with paternity leaves. But the idea, as labor laws, I think, with time, as the labor laws developed in the country, we realized the need for rights laws to protect women, because there were certain requirements that women had that were different, they were additional, and it had to be addressed. In the same way, to be able to live your life fully and completely, to be able to do everything that you essentially want to do in your life, there are services that you require, that you need to have access to that. And I think that is one of the reasons we need women rights to be recognized as an inherent part of not just human rights. I mean, human rights is a big set of laws, right? And the reason women rights specifically needs a recognition and understanding more than, I think, before you are able to provide women access to the whole set of services and laws and rights that I think they are, I think they have been denied over the years. I think you need to also recognize these as matter of right. For example, access to all kinds of services. For example, I think during your first question, I said a lot of women do not have access to contraceptive information services. Now, to most people, it might seem something not so important. I mean, it's not important. For most people, it's not important. But when you really think about it, you realize that by giving people access to the information that they require on contraceptive, and by providing that, you're actually providing women the time and the understanding and the information that is going to impact their entire lives. This is going to allow them to decide how to space their pregnancies, if they want to be pregnant, if they want to choose motherhood, if they want to choose motherhood, and how that impacts their professional lives. If they choose to have a professional life, how that then again impacts their family life. It is the same when it comes to the nature and kind of care they are provided in medical services or any other services for that matter, I think. And the reason women rights have to be recognized to the fullest extent is because unless you do, you will not be able to, women will not have access to the full, I think, bandwidth of liberty and rights that they require to be able to, I think, live to the fullest, professionally and personally.
Correct. It has been an intriguing session so far. We've received a lot of questions from the participants. So I've basically clubbed a few questions into one because of the time, due to the time crunch. And I'll just read out the first question. And Namrata, would you like to take this question? It basically talks about how education plays a role in economic empowerment of women and how important it is for women to be financially independent.
Hello.
Yeah, can you hear us? I can hear you.
Yeah. So I think what I personally feel is education is a leveler for all of us. It can change everything. So I think education is a first step in which a woman gets recognition in her own family, if I say, in a society, if I say, in any space wherever she goes. So I personally think education is most important for everything. And when she is educated, she can take her own financial decisions also. So the decision making power also comes from her financial independence only. So in all, I think the great leveler for all kind of women, for all kind of societies, for all streams of women, and for all the economic status of women, education is a leveler. So I personally think that that's more important from my point of view. And when a woman is able to take a decision making from her side, she can also be taking all the financial decisions for her family, not merely relying on the male counterpart, which will help her decide a majority of things for her as well as for coming generation also, for her child and everyone.
We see that when it comes to educating a girl child or between a girl child and a boy child, we normally see that the boy child is, given more favor or is really chosen to be the one who goes to study in school and or probably go for higher studies. What are your views about that? How does education in here plays a role? Because it starts from the very beginning. Namrata, can you hear me? Namrata, can you hear me? Oh.
Hello.
Namrata, yeah, I was asking that. How do you see that?
There's a lot of there's a lot of network glitch because of the district I am in. There's a power cut all of the time. So can you please repeat the question?
Yes, I will. I understand. Even I have a power cut here, and I've been trying to go ahead with the webinar. But yeah, my question was, when you see there's a boy child and a girl child, it's always and more often than not, basically, the boy child who's been given more preference to go for higher studies or to even go and get the basic education when it comes to school, be it a rural area, be it an urban area. The kind of situation is mostly the same, and we've been talking about this since decades, but we're still, not achieved that particular goal that we had, that we do not really classify or we do not really differentiate between a boy child and a girl child when it comes to giving basic education to our kids.
What I think is, the situation, what you are mentioning is, yes, it's true to some extent, but with my own personal experience, I'll say my father always said, that I'll make my child perform best. Right from my beginning of my career, I thought that, I should get the best of the stationery also, and he used to, give in all the possible way. So I think the perception which was there that, you don't have to educate the girl child is changing, is that the society is developing. And that's why I mentioned one point point that you have to create women mentors and women leaders. They'll make the change in the society. When a father or a society sees a girl performing best, and when they see a leader as a woman standing in front of them, sitting in front of them, taking majority of the decisions, they also get, I've got a lot of queries and I got a lot of requests from all the parents telling, that mentor my child. I also want my child to become like this, and all, especially the girl child, because coming from that gender, always, it attracts. So I feel that situation is there. What you're depicting is there, but yes, we are moving forward from that. So I'd like to mention also the positive side, that the kind of request I'm getting, now majority of the parents come in this small district also, and they say that, I also want my child to be in such positions where she can take decisions for herself, and she can be financially independent as well as independent. So I feel very good when such parents come and ask queries and say such things. So and I think it secondly depends on a child also, to how she's performing, and if the graph is regularly going good, the parents are also now excited to mentor their child. So I think yes, it's changing. It's changing in Chhattisgarh is what I feel. When it's changing in Chhattisgarh, it's changing all over India is what I feel. So yeah, it's a sign of positivity.
No, we are privileged and blessed to be, born to such parents who've actually always appreciated us and us performing better in studies and given us the platform and chance to showcase the talent that we have. But yes, the situation is there and it's changing. We cannot really deny the fact that it's changing. Yes. So my next question is to you, Ms. Purnima. We've never seen a woman sit idle and not do anything. But when it comes to, being given equal opportunity at workplace, the situation is still really not favorable to us, or to say to gender equality as a concept. So what are your opinion on that?
When it comes to government, at least the group A officers, we have as much voice as the male officers do. Women officers have equal voice. But when we come to the lower rungs of the hierarchy, when we come to group C and group D post, for example, a forest guard or a forester who has just finished training, after appointment, she is coming to the field to work. The the usual opinion of the officers, for example, group B and group A officers, is that she has just finished training, she has no field experience, she does not know anything, so let us give some cushion posting so that she manages her home also, so that she'll be able to adjust with both the professional life as well as the personal life. So but even the men who just finishes in training, even they do not know field work, even they don't have field experience. How come men are given good posting so that they could learn, and women are always prejudiced that since she has no field experience, she will not be able to manage, let us give a cushion posting, let us give a headquarter posting. And so when this happens, like I feel that the women in government, they are pampered, they are prejudiced, and uh, what to say, their capabilities, they cannot show their capabilities out. Their capabilities are suppressed from the very beginning, that they become redundant in their career. And example, there is a tranquilization process in wildlife. If there is a wildlife which creates a lot of conflict with the humans, so there will be one person who is very well trained in tranquilization guns. I can very well say that as of now, not even a single lady has been trained in tranquilization, because men are more capable of doing the same work. So when it comes to officers level, from my personal experience, what I have felt is that if there is some challenging post, if there is some challenging work, men are always preferred. Like, people always assume that a lady officer will not be able to carry on such work, so men are always preferred for such work. And another experience is, this has happened in army also, especially in army, where there is a protocol given to the wives of the officers. There is a protocol that when there is an official function, so when officers are attending, the main officer will cater to their seniors, and the female officers will cater to the wives of the officers. So in such an environment, so male officers are able to discuss the pros and cons of the service, and they are able to discuss the scope of their service in the future, what are all the possibilities, while the female officers are pressurized to uh, mingle with the wives of the officers, and especially in army this has happened from personal experience I'm saying. So for us, we are not given an opportunity to involve in those discussions. So when it comes to the private sector, a report says that the COVID-19 pandemic has laid off more women than men. So when the number of workforce like required reduces, it is women who are who are laid off more than men. And other thing is, when it comes to training and capacity building measures, it will be always the men who will be more in attendance than the women. So I think the opportunity should be given at each and every stage, not only in the appointment level, but also in the career progression as well as training and capacity building measures. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that such a practice also exists and in the most high-profile jobs as well. So we see that women who are really, have proved their mettle and are still, being discriminated in such small ways. It exists. That's very true. Another question that we've received, and it's, I think a lot of participants have been asking about it, and it's an important question because we're going to talk about men. So what role does a man play, in achieving gender equality? Miss Neha, would you like to answer that?
I think this is a question that all of us should answer like in parts, but I think when it comes to when you ask that what is the role of men in changing the perspective, I think it is if as a woman I have to say that you know I am being treated in a certain way in a given setting, in a professional setting, in a in a personal, in a domestic setting. Part of the reason I'm being treated in a certain way is because I have been brought up to behave in a certain way. Don't talk too loudly. You're a girl. You need to you should have long hair because you will not get a good match when you get married. Or you should learn how to cook. Or you should know how to do all your domestic chores, because no matter where you are professionally, you would still be expected to do that. And while we as women are taught to be a certain way, the problem is also that men are also taught to be a certain way. You have to be more masculine. You have to earn for the family. You're not supposed to enter the kitchen. I think so. These are the very small things that happen, and these are the small things that we keep hearing as we grow up. And we tend to we because this has happened. I think all of us have faced that in our homes, and unless we change. So when you say change this, it is you have to unlearn. The first thing you have to do is unlearn generations of, I think, stereotypical gender stereotype information and learning that has been provided to you. And it is not just men, it is also women. Because when you talk about patriarchy, the reason we have patriarchy in our country is not just because of men, it is also because there are women who are enforcing it. Right? And sometimes men are at the receiving end as well. So first you unlearn what you have, all of these gender stereotypes. As a man, I mean, I think individually we all know people, men, young boys, men who live alone. They would cook. I mean, as long as you're not married, you would cook in your homes because you don't have a household help. But the moment you have a wife, you want your wife. Your wife might be cooking, might be working, but you still want her to do it. But why? So you have to unlearn that and realize that if the two of you are putting in equal hours, or maybe she's putting in more hours at her office, you should be able to also put in work and effort in your household chores. So that is how you unlearn whatever you have seen happening, and that is how you change the system. You unlearn all of this, change yourself, and then you change the system. You do not keep unrealistic expectations from women. You should be able to do the same. I think it seems more logical that you should be able to do the same before expecting your better halves, your mothers, your sisters, the women in your family in general, to be a certain way. If you cannot change yourself, why do you want them to change just because you think it is more acceptable to the society? The only way you can change is by unlearning and by changing yourself. And you start it in your homes. You do not go preaching when you cannot do it. So start doing it within yourselves, do it within your domestic setup, and that is how you change, because that is how I think that is how the system falls.
Exactly. Like I also believe that patriarchy harms men as well, and we need to unlearn a lot of things that have been practiced on us, and we have been following that blindly, which has been practiced for centuries. So we'll need time to unlearn, but now is the time to unlearn all those that need to be
Exactly.
unlearned. All right. Thank you to all the panelists, and it is said that privilege is invisible to those who have it. This holds true for most of the men and some women as well, who do not think that there is a need for women empowerment because they're already empowered, the women who are already empowered, or some men who are really surrounded by empowered women. So when we talk about empowering women, we're talking about each and every woman of every religion, region, caste, creed, who's earning, not earning, and every woman for that matter, that women needs to be recognized and accepted. And all these sustainable development goals that we have, 2030 goals that we have, are only achievable if we have a society that educates and empowers all of its human to have equal opportunity, to be given equal opportunity, to differentiate between just and unjust, to judicially use resources, to be able to use resources judiciously and not discriminating on the basis of gender specifically, to say no to any form of violence, and most importantly, to coexist with peace and dignity. I would like our Dean Sir, Professor Dr. L.K. Dey, to deliver the vote of thanks and speak a few words about the webinar. Sir.
So thank you very much, Ashna. It was a wonderful session. We got some practical inputs with regard to the rights of women. Mostly since the 1960s, you come across that voices were raised, that history has done an injustice, that history was written by man, where the characteristics of man were said to be normal and the characteristics of woman were said to be a deviation. So during the 60s, the feminist movement, it started. And generally 3 schools have developed. One is that the traditional or liberal school, where women should be treated equally as men, equal rights for everyone, same rights, all should get equal rights. Second was the cultural feminism, that is, what is the role of women, role of men in society, and harmonizing the two. And third was the radical movement, where women started saying that men have dominated society, dominated women, like Maya Angelou. She started saying, "You may write me down in history, but with your bitter lies, but still like dust I will rise." So like that, you come across that since ages, although that is domination has been there, but also that is women have at different times risen. Especially it depends upon the home. The home is the place where the spark of equality comes in. You find all the leaders, women leaders, and 45 years back, D.K. Barua said one thing. Devkant Barua was from Assam. He said in the parliament, there is only one man, and that is Mrs. Indira Gandhi. So like that, you find that when you look into the lives of women who have risen in society, who have come to a position, that is, you look at the background, the home, you find that Mrs. Gandhi, from the beginning, she was with Nehru and was nurtured in that way. Now you look at West Bengal Chief Minister, Mrs. Mamata Banerjee, how dominant she is. You look at Mayawati, and you compare them with Mrs. Rabri Devi. So like that, you come, just academic discussion. So you come across that the nurturing, it begins in the home. And from that place, the fire of equality, it comes in. And over the years, the law has been changing, but getting the benefit of the law is different. 2 years back, when I was conducting an interview for the LLM students in Tata Institute of Social Science in Mumbai, at that time, one lady candidate, she also appeared the interview for this joining, and she said that she had joined JAG, Judge Advocate General, but she resigned after a few months. She said that in the army, they treat men and women, the commander who is there, she shouts in the same manner to men and the same manner to women, which she could not tolerate. The same abusive language, the language which is generally followed in the army, the commander he uses. So there generally that, because she was nurtured in a different way, she could not tolerate. So that that type of that nurturing is required. Whatever problems come, whatever hurdles are there, you must be ready to, that is, woman must be ready to face, and that nurturing begins in the home. So it was a wonderful session, and already that is many laws have been developed with regard to protection of women. We have discussed, wonderful discussion was there, the practical issues, the problems during COVID-19, the role of women in society. Women work throughout the day in office, back at home they have to work. And today I was reading about the mother's instinct, where that is a child was taken to the doctor and the child was crying again and again. But the doctor said, nothing is there, you take her home. But the mother said, no, something is wrong, because I have seen her crying at different times, but this cry is different. So that mother's instinct also is there. And women also have that is a role in the family. That role, because if that is a few days back, men, they started, once the shutdown was a little bit lifted, men, women, they started coming in scooties, that roadside shops, taking together without mask, taking this pizzas and other things. So like that, that is, the home has to be controlled by the mothers, because child, that is, whatever the mother may work, but in the home, that is, child looks up at the mother. So women have an important role both in home and outside home. So that is in the education field, when you educate one man, you teach, that is, you educate one individual. But if you educate one woman, you educate the family. So both roles are there. She has a role as a woman, have a role outside home, in service, everywhere. But once home is there, she also has a role in the home. Both roles are there, equally important. So we had a wonderful discussion, practical things were said in this webinar on Beyond Bias, Empowering Women for Sustainable Growth. I'm thankful to the panelists, Ms. Namrata Jain, IAS Assistant Collector of Chhattisgarh, and one of my colleagues' daughter, she also that is joined the IPS, Sara Sharma, one of my colleagues' daughter. She is now SP in Gajapati, and she has done a wonderful thing. She has adopted one village, one rural tribal village, and she goes there, she distributes that is clothes, food, looks after the problems of each of the families in the area, and they treat her as the mother. So wonderful role she is playing there, and that is the present that is civil service officers, they do wonderful role. They have a that is dynamic vision, young. So I thank with Namrata Jain, in spite of busy schedule, busy work during this COVID pandemic, when every moment is that is, they have to look into the situations. And our collector here, he has declared shutdown for 4 days because of the increasing number of cases. But that is it is an important role containing this COVID. So thank you, Ms. Namrata Jain, for being with us and giving your thoughts with regard to the role of women and for empowering women. I thank Ms. Purnima Pandian, Indian Forest Service, DFO in Bhadrak. Women have an important role in conservation of forests, protecting forests. Now there's a great problem in the forest. People are killing elephants. That is one of the major problems. That is killing elephants in the forest. And during this pandemic, because much focus is not given to the forest area, so a lot of problems are there, and she has an important role. And as in the forest, there a lot of challenges are to be faced for protecting, preserving, conservation of forests, the wildlife, sustainable growth, role of women, tribal women. All these rights have to be looked into. I thank Purnima Pandian for being with us and giving highlighting on different aspects of sustainable development and conservation role of women. I thank Ms. Sneha Mukherjee, Human Rights Law Network. She can do a lot for protection of human rights, public interest litigation, bringing things before the Supreme Court and protecting women, fighting for the rights, just like that one Shreya Singhal, long time back. She was a student of BA, but then too she brought certain matters before the Supreme Court of India with regard to that is section 124A of the Indian Penal Code, Shreya Singhal case, and 66A of the Information Technology Act. So you can do wonders in the Supreme Court. It is the Supreme Court is now that is looking into all matters when it is brought to their notice. I thank you, Ms. Sneha Mukherjee, for being with us. I thank the moderator, my colleague, Ms. Ashna Siddiq, who has done a wonderful job bringing people from different facets, different areas of life, women who have been empowered. So each one that is have gone through a lot of struggle to reach this level. So that can be an inspiration to all those who are present here and listening to this webinar. They will be inspired by your achievements, but what you have done. I thank Ms. Ashna Siddiq for bringing such people together and for organizing the webinar in a nice manner and inspiring the participants who are present today. I thank my colleagues, Mr. Punyashlok, Palak Jawa, Ishani for being, and also Jagmohan, who has also that is worked with us. I thank the authorities, and I must also thank Mr. Pandeji for arranging all this webinar, working with us and making this program a success. So I thank everyone, and it was a wonderful webinar, and the participants must have gained a lot of inspiration, a lot of knowledge with regard to the that is problems women face and how that is women can be treated equally, how they can rise and bring sustainable development for the society and for the that is for everyone on this earth. So again, thank you all very much for this wonderful webinar. Thank you. Have a nice time. Stay home, stay safe.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
We have had a
you.
really nice session. About 1,200 people were there opting and going out. So we have a capacity of only 1,000 people. Even though 2,100 people have registered, we could only just take 1,000 people. But it's been a great session, and I believe and I hope that whatever we've discussed impacts some lives so that we're able to bring in some change and probably impact lives in a better way. I thank all the panelists for taking out time from their busy schedule, and it's been a privilege to have known such young, dynamic women since years. For some years, I've known all three of you, and it's a brilliant, brilliant moment and a pride moment for me to see all of you achieve so much in your lives and make changes in lives of people and do things which are important. Thank you so much. And I would also like to thank Dean Sir for allowing me to conduct this webinar along with all the other authorities, my registrar and Vice Chancellor Sir. I would like to thank my colleagues who've been there and have been instrumental in conducting this webinar. Ishani, Acharya, Palak Chava, and Punyashlok, who's also helped me decide on the title of this webinar. Would like to thank Jap Mohan for his ever-ending support, and Pandey sir, for helping me with all the IT things. Thank you all. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful, wonderful session. Thank you so much.